then it doesn't work, in your favor all the time. And then equity and success. So who you negotiate with? Clients and the other agents, your listing agent or a buyer's agent. There's you are regardless, you represent the buyer or seller, you're always representing one side or the other there. And with the whoever's on the other side there, let me back up a little bit. There are different paths of negotiation. Obviously, in the past few years, most of the time it works out. You make an offer, it's accepted, and you move to closing. Usually you're one, if you're representing a buyer, you're one of a handful of offers, and hopefully you made the best offer and it gets worked out. But now we're starting to get into more, a little bit more houses are sitting in the market a little bit longer, and you are having the opportunity to have an offer, whether it's going to get accepted right off the gate, get rejected, counter offered, something like that. When you're working with, I don't ever like rejecting offers when you're representing a seller. Sellers, a lot of times, if they get offer that's too low, that's their knee-jerk reaction, because there's going to be emotion tied to it a lot of times, because it's their house, and somebody makes an offer lower than what they think their house is worth, they're inclined to reject it because they're mad and offended and all that. But you as the realtor, you're there to take emotion out of the equation and make sound business decisions on behalf of help advise your clients make sound business decisions. So if you're representing a seller and you get a low offer, and it's, you think it's offensively low, just tell them to counter back at full price. Don't just flat out reject it, because then the buyer a lot of times it's not going to end up working out in the long run. But I always like to have, if it's a low offer, say you've got a listing, it's been on the market for 3 weeks, hadn't had any offers yet. That's usually when the low offers the bottom feeders start to come out. So you got it listed for 400,000, you got an offer for 325. The seller didn't think they're obviously going to go that low, but advise them to counter back at full price. And when you do get the offer, take the full amount of time that the offer has given you. The offer is always going to have an expiration time date on there. So if they give you 48 hours, take the full 48 hours to respond to it. I always like to, if it's a low offer, I like to drag out negotiations for as long as possible, even if I know it's probably not going to work out. What that does is it gives, if there's somebody else who's going to show the house, if they show the house and they know that there's an offer on there, obviously you're not going to tell them what the offer is, and they may make an assumption that it is a good offer that you're negotiating. They show it, they like it, boom, you get another offer. You can use that as leverage to get a good offer out of it. So that's why you always want to try to make sure you drag those, even if it's a lowball offer or something, drag them out as long as possible. If they work out, great. If they don't, it gave you an opportunity there to try to get another offer in the door and use it as leverage there. So rejection, it could happen to you as a buyer's agent if you're representing a purchaser and they make a low offer on a house. You've got to let them know that I try to educate my buyers that if a house has been on the market for 30 days, we're going to do a market analysis. We're going to, say, all right, I think it's worth, the house is 500,000 and it's been on the market for 30 days. In this market, obviously, if it's sitting, it's overpriced. And then you do a market analysis for your client, you say, it's probably worth like 475, 480, somewhere around there. So if they decide, well, I want to make an offer of 400. You might want to try to talk them out of making an offer that low. because, the repercussions that come with that. I always try to, it's a fine line between making an offer low enough where you want to try to be able to get a deal and negotiate, but you don't want to go so low where you offend the seller, like we were talking about before, and you sour negotiations and you started off on the wrong foot. Because that could backfire and not give you the ability to get as good of an offer as good of a sales price as possible. So there's that fine line. So if something's listed for 5, you think it's worth 475, it's been on market for 30 days, and your buyer wants to come in at 400. Hey, look, there's an unlikelihood they're going to come down to that price. Maybe we start at 430 or 440 or something a little bit higher than that, and see how low we can get them to come down. Something that's not going to be quite as offensive. So that's good advice to avoid getting rejected on the buyer side there. Then with the process, if it's accepted, great, move on. If it's countered, then that's where the negotiation part comes in. Most of the time, the price is going to be the big sticking factor. So if you are representing a buyer and you want to help them get the best deal possible, and price is important to them about getting the best deal possible, then you want to find out, all right, what else can we do to tailor the offer to work in the seller's favor? The seller is looking for a particular closing date. Let's give them that. If they're looking for, they need a rent back or something like that, let's give them that. If they, if there's any other terms or anything, and they want to take their appliances with them, let them have them. Anything else you can put in the offer to make it comfortable for the seller, that also helps you maybe get a little bit better deal on the price as well. So, but we'll get into more details on that in a little bit. This is just kind of showing the basics of how the process works. And you can counter offer back and forth, many times, when you make an offer. Eventually you'll get to a point where both sides will figure out, all right, we know this is probably the seller's bottom line. This is as high as the buyer is willing to go. And thank you. And if there's too big of a gap there to make it work, then maybe we can't get it to work. So, but that's where it comes in. Your ability to help negotiate the deal can help bridge those gaps that when buyers or sellers draw lines in the sand or dig their heels in or something like that. There are things you can do. We'll get into a little bit of detail to help that out, to make sure it to help get the deal done. So, as I was saying, usually the primary factor is price in the negotiation. And then the other terms that we're talking about, which can factor in, or, timing, whether it's closing, financial, you want to make sure you put in a proper earnest money deposit. You don't want to, a lot of people require 1% for the earnest money deposit. So if there are terms that are put in the agent only comments that the listing agent has set forth in there, you want to make sure you give when you're representing a buyer, you put that in any offer. And then there may be other things as far as inspection and all that. All right, the 3 P's of negotiation. Prepare. Preparation is the key, building confidence, ensuring a smooth negotiating process. So whether it's a buyer or a seller, or let's say if it's a buyer, show the house this afternoon, buyer likes it, they like it enough or they want to make an offer. Now, a lot of times I will have done, most of the time before I'm going to show a house, I'll do my homework in advance. If I'm not as familiar with the neighborhood, I want to go out and do a market analysis before I go show the property, so I know what the house is worth. You talk to the listing agent as well, and you say, say the house has been on the market for 30 days. Instead of just setting it up through showing time, you can call the listing agent and say, hey, look, I'm showing your house this afternoon. Just want to see how traffic's been. If there's anything in particular, your seller's looking for that's held it from why it's been on the market for 30 days. it's good to kind of ask those things. So, when the buyer comes out, if they look at it and they like it, they're going to ask you those questions anyway. So it's better to already have those answers in hand. Makes you look like a better agent, because you are being proactive and all that kind of stuff. And it also helps you out when it comes to negotiating to have all that extra intel from the seller side. Some sellers, listing agents will be willing to share more information than others. Obviously, at the end of the day, they want to sell the house. They want to try to work it out, but they represent their clients too. So that some agents will disclose more information than they probably should sometimes, but it can't hurt to ask. The worst they can say is no. And you just want to get some information on, if it has been on the market for a while, why, from their opinion. And, the pros and cons of the house, they'll have a good idea. Like if I have a listing, it's been on the market for 30 days, I've had 15, 20 showings or something like that. I got an idea why it's not selling. If it's a price, there's something else with the house or the neighborhood or all that. But 90% of the time, it's the price in this market. Most people, have the wherewithal to have their house buttoned up before they put it on the market and all that kind of stuff. So preparation, same thing for when you're representing a seller. You're going to do this in advance when you price the house and everything. But say, you recommend to a seller before you put it on the market, you do the market analysis, you think the house is worth $400,000. Seller says, no way, I need to list it for $450,000. You go through all the explaining the pros and cons of overpricing and all that. But, at the end of the day, it's their call. You want a listing. So, you just need to make sure in preparation of when you list it. All right, if you want to list it at $450,000, I don't think if somebody does come in and wants to buy it for that price, it's not going to appraise for that. So we're going to run into those issues. B, explain you went through all the pros and all the cons of overpricing and how it sits on the market, you end up netting less and everything like that. But so when you do get an offer that's lower, you've already prepared your seller for why they're going to get lower offers and what the expectations of buyers are, because they're going to look at the same comps that you showed them as to why the house should be priced where it is. So again, preparing them in advance of when you put it on the market, setting their expectations of where you think it's going to sell and why, and backing up with data and experience and all that kind of stuff, I think makes it very easy for you as a listing agent to, when you get a low offer, to explain to the seller why it's low. And so they're not surprised by it. And, you don't want to say, I told you so. You just say, look, I'm the expert here. This is based on research and experience and feedback and everything. And, if we get an offer around 425 or something like that, when you want to list at 450 and I thought it was going to sell around 4, you jump on it. You don't try to negotiate that. So there are different ways of preparation for, whether it's buyer side or seller side or whatever there. Present, you move into the negotiating process by presenting the offer. All right, so from the buyer side, and as a listing agent, I always appreciate this a lot. So when you're representing a buyer and they want to make an offer, always call the listing agent in advance before you plan to do so, just to make sure there are no other offers on the table. And that, again, there's no other details or anything that they need. You say, all right, well, I'm putting it together. I'm getting together with my seller this evening. We'll put it together. I'll have it to you at some point this evening. I'm going to email to you, then I'll text you to follow up with you to let you know I'm going to send it. So you always want to make sure multiple means of communication with the listing agent, because I can't tell you how many times in the market today where I'll get a text from a buyer's agent and just randomly, hey, just sent you an offer. I never heard from him before about, showing the house or anything. And then I'm kind of old school. I like to be able to talk to people, the other side, the agent, once they do send me an offer, or, because I don't feel them out, won't pick up the phone, text me back. Like, just don't text all the time. I know people are busy and all that. Find time. If the other side is reaching out to you or you need to reach out to the other side, call them, talk to them. Don't just do text or email only. You got to get that's going to help you out, especially if you're new to the process as well. It's going to help you out with building up some rapport with realtors out there, getting more details, because you're only going to be able to get a limited amount of details from text or email. It's easier, I find, to talk to realtors, so you can get some more intel that you can provide to your buyer or seller that's going to be useful for them. But when I send an offer, or when the agent, the best way to do it is, prepare them, say, hey, look, I'm putting it together. Once you do, send them the offer, and you don't just forward like the authentic sign off, or if you're actually meet with them in person, doing it in writing, send them, pull it out from Authenticsign, have it as an attachment, send them a specific email to the listing agent, attach the offer, break down in the email the terms of the offer: price, closing date, financing terms, inspection, earnest money deposit. Are they asking for anything, appliances or anything else? It just helps bullet points all the main aspects of the offer. It makes it a lot easier for the listing agent when you send it to them, so that they can just kind of briefly review it, say, all right, cool, yeah, this doesn't look too bad. Of course, they're going to open up the file attachment and check and see all the other details in there as well. But that helps out a lot. It makes you look more professional to do that. It makes the life easier for the listing agent. The deal gets worked out, hopefully, then it's a good check mark on you. And then, that way you could report with that other agent. And then hopefully down the road, this happens a lot. Like this spring, if the market gets hot again and you have a buyer that wants to make an offer on that same agent's property or a different property that same agent has, they're going to remember you. Oh yeah, they had their act together. I liked working with them. It was a smooth transaction. Trust me, when I get on listings, if I get 10 offers and there's like 2 or 3 that are close, and I've worked with 1 or 2 of the agents before, I'm definitely leaning towards that, working with them. If all terms and everything are equal with the buyer, with the price and financing and all that, I'll tell my clients, they're like, look, we're having a hard time making a decision here. I'm like, all right, I've worked with this realtor before. Everything went very smoothly. They were cool. I trust that everything will continue to go smoothly. So let's go with this one. So it'll help you get more deals done when we get into, multiple bid situations and all that kind of stuff. So, just that helps out with the presentation process. Do that. Same thing, like when you're, working with a seller as well. I find it easier when I receive an offer and a listing of mine, same thing, email a summary of the offer to your client, send them, with the attached offer, say, all right, I got an offer. I'm going to email you the summary and what the offer looks like. Call me once you get it, and then let's review. So again, the bullet points thing makes it much easier for your seller to kind of boil it all down. They don't want to read through the whole 10-page contract because 80% of stuff in there's BS anyway. It's just legalese. So they really just want to know, all right, what's the price? What's the closing date? How good are their financing? What is their deal with inspection? How big is the earnest money deposit? Are they asking for anything else like appliances or anything like that? How long do we have to look at the offer? When does it expire? And that's kind of main stuff that you got in there. So it just makes you look more professional as well as an agent when you're helping your client out, understand it easier and all that. Because they don't deal with this every day. Our clients don't. So they don't. These contracts that we see all the time. We can read through it quickly. They're going to sit there, and some of them will sit there and read the whole thing when they don't really need to, because they don't need to see all those different, clauses and stuff in there that are relevant. So make it easier for them. Makes you look better too. Position, move both parties closer until you have a full agreement. All right, that's just part of the negotiating process. We want to, we'll get into that in more detail, but that just goes to, I never ask my seller clients, all right, what's your bottom line? What do you want to sell this for? Until we get to a point where I feel like they're dug in. I feel like the other side's dug in to say, all right, well, what do you want to sell this for? What I think we've got a price here that is, especially if you think it's a good price based on comps and everything like that, that's the best point to kind of bring that up, to pitch that to them, tell them that, hey, look, I don't think we're going to get much of a better offer than this. We've been on the market for 2.5 months. We've only got one offer. This is about as good as we're going to get. That's where you kind of come in to help convince your client who may be too hard-headed or thinks their house is worth more than it is to get the deal done. So same thing on the buyer side also. If you got a buyer who's dragging you around, making low offers, they're wasting your time. You don't want to spin your wheels and do that. You got to kind of make them have a reality check. Show them what each house is worth. The market is not like 2010 when you could make low offers and sometimes they would stick. There's low inventory. Yeah, I mean, houses are sitting on the market a little bit longer. That's just because there's not as many buyers out there, but prices aren't really going down. They're holding steady. They're still going up. So you need to make sure buyers are aware of that just because there's national news that the housing market isn't doing well, it's not that it's not doing well. It's just, it's been so crazy the past 3 years. It had to come back down to earth. And we're getting back to where it was pre-COVID, which is a normal, sustainable market, but we just have a little bit lower inventory right now than we have. So, all right. So those are the 3 Ps. We'll get into some more details about each one. So prepare, know your goal. And that's, like I said, with a buyer, you're going to do your homework in advance to show them what the house is worth when they make an offer, and you need to explain to them, what the, where the goal we think we should end up is. They're going to tell you where they want to end up, and then hopefully you're able to convince them that it's a realistic goal. And hopefully if it's a new client, maybe you don't know them as well. If it's a client you've had for a little while, you probably know how they like to negotiate, or their preference in regards to that. I've got some clients that are like, if they're investors or something like that, they come in, they've got numbers, they need to make it, they can only make it work at a certain price point. They'll tell you in advance, all right, if we can get it for this, the deal makes sense. If not, I can't make it work. So that makes it pretty easy. And that makes it easy for explaining to the listing agent, where you're coming in at a price and what the price is you need to make it work out for the investor to make sense, things like that. But if it's just a regular buyer who's looking to buy it as their primary residence, there's going to be some emotional attachment to it. And, sometimes you've got husband and wife. The wife likes it more than the husband does. And that's always a battle that, you got to fight, that you can't really get as involved in that. You got to let them work that out, but you kind of will know, who makes the call, wears the pants a lot of times. I mean, sometimes it's a joint decision. Sometimes, one party or the other, is the one that, is going to make the final call on what to do with with an offer or a house or something like that. And, think ahead. So, if it's a house that's only been on the market for a week, it's in a nice area, that doesn't mean that there's something necessarily wrong with it. And I've seen it happen a lot recently where either myself or some of my buyer's agents have, wow, this sat for a week. Well, maybe we can come in and slow play it and get a good offer or something. Don't be aggressive, because there's still a chance if there's another offer, somebody else is going to come in quickly behind that. So don't take your time or play around with it. If the buyer likes it and they want to make an offer, be aggressive, put it together, don't drag it out. You don't want to push them too hard or be too pushy, but at the same time, you want to let them know that, hey, look, it's only been on the market for a week. This is a nice house. This is in a nice neighborhood. It's priced pretty well. We might be able to get a little bit of a deal on it, but we don't want to try to get too low of an offer and have them drag negotiations out and then have somebody else come in and all of a sudden now we got a bidding war and you got to pay more than you thought you did if you want to get the house. So that's an example of thinking ahead. We said, I kind of touched on expectations. That's your job to make sure that your client understands where the market is, what they should expect to be able to get the house for, what the house is worth, all that kind of stuff. Be informed. The best way to be informed is to call the other side. If you're representing a buyer, call a listing agent, get as much intel as you can from them. If you're representing a seller, after showing, get feedback. That's always helps. You always want to give your sellers feedback, especially they're used to everyone's houses selling the first day on the market because the market's been hot. if it's been a week or two in the house, we got 6 or 7 showings or something like that, you want to make sure you're getting feedback and informing your sellers to what's going on and why it's not selling, because they're going to be really curious. Because like, gosh, I thought it was going to sell quickly. They shouldn't think that, because you should have prepped them in advance. But a lot of times they still have that mindset as to thinking that the market's still hot and that the house is going to sell quickly. Obey the laws, obviously, and know all the documents inside and out. So knowing documents inside and out. This is something else too that I used to always, regardless of the client, if they were experienced, bought several homes, or they're first-time home buyer or something like that. I used to go through the contract when we sat down or on the phone or something, we're reviewing on the line, and go through every part of it. I got to a point where I wasn't sure that was as good a use of my time as it was. It's something that I don't think you need to do that for everybody. There are some clients that I think appreciate it more than others, and you just need to make a judgment call on that. Because it takes some time to sit there and go through every detail of the contract when, like I said, the main points are price, closing date, financing, inspection terms, things like that. You don't need to go through like, if it's a VA and FHA loan, or if it's, the risk loss clause, and I mean, all those other random things that are in there. Sometimes it's good to go through if you have a new client, or it's a first-time home buyer or something. I think that's always useful and helpful to do it the first time they're making an offer, so they're clear on every detail that's in the contract. But I think it's up to you. And I think it's sometimes I will ask my clients, hey, do you want me to go through everything with this so you're clear on this? And they'll say, no, we're fine. We read through it. We're okay. And then sometimes they'll say, yeah, if you don't mind going through it. That way, if you do it the first time, you don't have to do it subsequent times, and it makes you look better. So this is kind of going off a tangent, but make sure you know the contract inside and out. You know what every clause means, not just reading it to them and then saying it verbatim. I mean, you can also give the abridged version for each, section of the contract. So it's important to know what you're talking about and understand it and explain it to people properly so they know what they're getting ready to sign. So, any questions on prepare? Ask purposeful questions. All right, so it provides you with the points you will negotiate on as far as like, why they want to ask for a certain price or things like that. It provides insight on where your client will have some leverage. Again, sets clear expectations. I think that's really one of the most important parts of being prepared, is setting expectations for your client. And, it helps you get to know your client and their goal better. Helps you learn what will make it a win-win negotiation for both parties. So I think that it's just good to ask a lot of questions to your client early on. I mean, that's something, even when I'm showing houses before they make an offer, if it's a new client or somebody that I've just had referred to me, I'm always asking questions like, and I'll tell people in advance. So, all right, when we're looking at this house, I want you to be completely blunt and honest with me. I said, this is not my house. Got nothing to do with it. You're not going to offend me if you trash it. It helps me get better feedback from you. So be completely honest, because I find sometimes people, when they first meet you, they'll withhold or, hold back, what their true feelings are. They don't want to seem, too opinionated or something like that, where I'd rather have somebody be opinionated, because that way you're like, oh God, this kitchen's awful, or, the backyard, I can't believe it's this too tiny. Sometimes people will be reserved and not do that. But if you can get them to open up and be more comfortable with you and be more honest and open, it'll help you out, as far as figuring out exactly what your client wants, those kinds of things. So that's always a good thing that I always try to initially will try to help as an icebreaker, and also just helps you get a better rapport with your client initially early on too. So something good to do with like open-ended questions, when you're asking those, let them have the floor and talk. Don't try to talk too much. I mean, and when you go to a house also, I know most of you probably don't do this, but you don't walk in and show them a house, be like, this is a dining room, this is a living room. Don't be a master of the obvious. That's annoying. I mean, it's just stupid to do that. But go in and say, all right, this house, before you even walk in the door, the house 2 doors down sold 3 months ago for 450,000 and it had 2 offers. That one further down the street is under contract right now. And I heard they had 2 offers on it. Like, give them details and information that they'll find useful, and it makes you look good because you've done your homework and your research before you get out there. That the neighborhood, they'll start to trust you more when you give them information that they find useful about not just the house itself, but about the neighborhood, instead of just stating the obvious, which anybody can do.
I have a question.
Yep.
So I'm assuming that when we're doing stuff like that, we're calling those listing agents prior to our showing, saying something like, hey, I'm showing a house in your neighborhood. I saw that you guys are under contract. Like, how did that deal go? Like, cause I'm trying to figure out where we get in this information, especially about how many offers we had there.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that a lot of times they're not going to tell you most of the time, like what it's sold for. But that's what I was talking about was, all right, I'm showing this house this evening. Let me do a little research on the neighborhood and see, so I can figure out, all right, it's been on the market for 3 weeks. Why hasn't it sold? Ask the listing agent, number one, some details. Number two, do your own little market analysis, before you go out there. Check it out and see what other homes are for sale in the neighborhood. Because there's nothing to make, this happened to me before. If I've been busy and I've gotten out shown a house, there's nothing that makes you look dumber than going out to show a house. There's a house across the street with a for sale sign or like a pending sign. And they're like, hey, what about that house? I'm like, it makes you look dumb. So it's do your homework in advance. It helps you out, makes you look smarter. They'll trust you more that, because they're relying on you. You're their guide and their resource for all knowledge of real estate. So, it helps. And it makes you look even worse if the buyer has already done their research and looked on Zillow or something like that and seen, saw what it sold for and everything. And then, the husband's like, hey, what's up with that house? And you're like, oh, I'll look into it. And the wife's like, oh yeah, I saw it. It closed and it's for, 50,000 over asking price, something like that, So that's the main reason. Yes. But I'll call, especially if it's like a pending sale, recent, and if it's a closed sale, I don't think there's obviously you can get all the information that you need, from MLS as far as like, what it sold for and all that. But if you did see that it sold over asking price, maybe you call that realtor and say, hey, by the way, just curious how many offers y'all got, so that's something that'll be helpful, I think, that you can share with the buyer client when you're out showing stuff. So, but pending sales are one of the most important things to call on, besides talking just to the listing agent, especially if it's something that's on that street or an adjacent street, or there's not many houses on them for sale in the whole neighborhood, which is the case in a lot of times, a lot of neighborhoods now. And there's like one house that's pending. You definitely want to call that, get some information on that. But also, like, once you've kind of done, that's like initially, especially when it's meeting a buyer for the first time, I like to get in there before we even step in the house, give them a little bit of, knowledge on the neighborhood. Maybe you can say, oh yeah, I have a friend that lives the next neighborhood over. There's, they really like this. They've got some friends that live over here. I mean, anything you can do to help provide some, information to them that they're not going to get off the internet about what's going on with a particular neighborhood or the house or something like that. That's what gives, value to you and your job as a realtor to your client. So, but once I'm done kind of doing that, getting in the house, that's when I think it's good. Once you walking up to the house, it's good to kind of ask information about the client, get them to, ask open-ended questions, get them to start providing information about what they like, what they don't like, those kinds of things. And then I think that helps make it easier too, like I say, if they decide, all right, I think this is the house, we want to make an offer, then you've already kind of prepared, you've got some information, say, all right, well, we talked about this earlier about the pricing of the house and everything. I think it's worth X, it's been on the market for 2 weeks. I talked to the listing agent, the sellers are moving and they need to be out by the end of December. So, we might kind of have an advantage here with getting them to negotiate some, if we give them exactly the closing date they want. So it helps to have all that information handy in advance. You don't have to, oh, let me check on it and I'll get back to you and all that. So you kind of, when you're at the house, if they decide they like it, you make an offer. That way you can kind of follow up with more and more, details and how you want to tailor the offer and all that. So some examples of open-ended questions, what additional information should I know? What's important about closing in 30 days? How do you feel about that? Closed-ended questions, they're going to get more specific, one-word answers. Same thing when you're asking a listing agent questions, about the house and details. The open-ended questions obviously are going to be much better because some listing agents are going to be pretty tight-lipped. But if you can ask them open-ended questions, you might be able to get more information out of them to share just with information that you can provide your client. Let's see. The what and why questions, what would happen if, and, it helps you anticipate the next steps in negotiation. Why is this important to you? Helps you gain information, gain more insight. If the client says, well, I want to get this house for 400 after you told them it's worth 425. You say, well, why is this important to you? And if they're just because they want to get a deal, then, you need to explain to them that, this is what the market's showing the house is worth. I think we might be able to get a little better deal because, the things are a little bit slower right now, but, we're not in a declining real estate market. Most sellers know that their houses values are pretty stable right now. I think it's important to make sure you tell people. Take action scenario. So, we're going to skip this right now.
Can I ask a question about that
Sure.
last slide? So I've had a buyer before who, she was dead set on getting a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard for me to explain to her, because in her mind, the price that she sees is the price. That's the price. How do you explain to them, this is like a starting price? This is what they're asking. In this industry, which the price tag is not, it's not like you going into the store and you see this house for $899, you're not paying more than you're asking, you're paying what it's worth. How do you explain that? Because she was so dead set on, well, I'm paying $5,000 more than they're asking. Yeah, you might be paying more than you're asking, but it's still based on what the market is saying it's worth.
Then that's where doing a market analysis comes in. Okay. So you can show them even before, you don't necessarily have to do a full market analysis to share with your client before you look at the house. But once they look at it and they like it, I'll tell them, I know in my head before I go to a listing or before I'm showing something what I think it's worth. And then I'll tell them and say, all right, look, I've looked at the comps and I'm going to share this with you. I'm going to do a market analysis for you. And I'm going to show you why I think this house is worth this. And I'm going to pull up, 4 or 5 sales in the neighborhood. I'm going to show you the differences between those. I try to find as best comparables as I can as far as size, bedroom, bathroom count, low proximity to the house and all that kind of stuff. And just say, look, that's my job, is to tell you what the house is worth. At the end of the day, you're going to decide what you're going to pay for it, but I'm going to educate you and tell you if you're going to pay X amount of dollars for it, why I think that's, a good value or it's not. So that's all about just making sure they're aware and you've done a good job of explaining to them what you think the house is worth based on your professional opinion, based on the data that you're sharing with them. So they know that way they can be informed about that, not just say, because it's not always, I mean, it's tough to say like the list price is always what a house is worth because, in the springtime, a lot of people price their houses, probably a little bit lower than what they're worth in order to incite a bidding war. And then you always get bid up like that. Not many people are doing that now because we're in a little bit of a slower market. So a lot of times now people are pricing it with a little bit of padding in there because they're not because there's fewer buyers out there, much less likelihood of having a bidding war come in there. And that way, sometimes you'll have a little bit of negotiation, sometimes you won't. I mean, I had a listing a couple weeks ago where, we priced it, with a little bit of padding in there. I think we were at I thought it would appraise like around 515, 520. Appraisals aren't as much of an issue right now because you've got so many comps from the spring market to use, but they're not really that's not the same value. We're in a different market right now than we were 4 months ago. But, we only had 3 showings the first weekend. But somebody came in and liked it and, felt compelled enough to make an offer. So we got an offer that was, I think it was only 5,000 off the asking price. It was much better than we anticipated. And we jumped on it because somebody liked it. So at the end of the day, it's what the buyer feels that the house is worth. But, that agent did a good job of showing them the comps, showing them what the house is worth. So a lot of times it's a pretty easy sell for your buyer client. If they like the house, right now to show them what it's worth based on comparables from the spring market and everything. Because you're not going to typically have appraiser issues. You run into that more like the beginning of every year because you've only got comps to use from the fall and the winter market where prices aren't, they're not as many multiple bid situations and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, just explain to them, that's the best thing. Make yourself useful, show them that your knowledge, share your knowledge of the market with them and do your research. So, they know you've done your homework and they can have a better understanding of that. So, any other questions?
With the appraisal, so if someone's selling the house lower and that's the strategy that they're using, and you've done your market analysis, but they want to bid higher, the buyer wants to bid higher, but that they don't have the cash with the appraisal gap, how much, I mean, you can't give a definitive number, of course, but how much higher can you actually bid?
I mean, there's no real written rule for that. Yeah. It just comes down to, the seller listing agent's going to have an idea of what it's, if it's going, I always know, all right, I listed this house for 5. I know it'll probably appraise for 525, but I'm getting offers in the 550 range and the buyers aren't waiving the appraisal clause or doing something with that, I'm going to tell my seller, look, all right, this is a nice offer, but we may not end up getting this for this because of that. So, if it is a multiple bid situation and, there's always somebody that's willing to waive the appraisal or has cash or something like that, they're going to have a massive advantage if it's going over that, number of what, ballpark of what you think the house will appraise for. But there's nothing to, if it's, I wouldn't let that stop your buyer from making an offer, but I would just make sure they're aware of the scenario, because what could happen is, all right, if the house is listed for 5 and your client's willing to pay up to 550 for it, but you've shown them, say, look, I really only think this is going to appraise for 525. So, but you kept the appraisal clause in the contract. Just explain how that works. Say, all right, look, even if your offer is accepted, it's still going to be contingent on an appraisal, and we kept the clause in there because that protects you as a buyer. Say when the appraisal clause comes into effect, 1 of 4 things can happen. If it appraises at or above the sales price, we're good. We move forward. If it appraises below, then either, the seller agrees to reduce the price to match the appraised value. You come up with the cash difference to make up, and if you don't have the cash difference, then, sometimes the seller will negotiate, say, well, I'll drop the price 10,000 if you come up with an extra 10 of cash. But ultimately, as the buyer, you have the option of voiding the contract if it does not appraise, for the contract sales price. But the seller can say, screw off, I'm not going to drop the price either. So just make sure they're aware of how the process works with that, the steps involved in that. But it's not like by making an offer over what you think it would appraise for, it really puts more pressure on the seller than it does the buyer.
Can I ask one more follow-up
Yeah,
question?
sure.
So to what extent does the seller and the client need to understand the purchase agreement? Because in terms of knowing when they may or may not be able to get out of a contract, or when the buyer may say, okay, we're getting out of a contract, and the seller's blindsided because they don't understand purchase agreement.
I mean, if you're representing a buyer,
If you're representing the seller,
then you make sure the seller is aware of that. Just say, when you get an offer, present the offer. If the offer is, you think a really attractive offer, but you're like, wow, this probably isn't going to appraise for this, then you just gotta, explain to them, say, look, are there, if it's a multiple offer situation, are there alternative offers that are better? Like, I'll sometimes talk to the listing of the buyer's agent as well and say, hey, look, this is a nice offer, but we don't think this is going to appraise for this. So what's your buyer's deal? Do they have cash to make up the difference? Because I already talked to my client, the seller. If it doesn't appraise, they're just going to put it back on the market. They're not going to drop the price. So I try to get a couple steps ahead of that so that it doesn't become an issue and blow up, and not just well, here's the offer, just hope and pray that it works out with the appraisal, because then you don't want to go under contract and then have the appraisal fall through and then go back on the market. It'd be better to kind of have that discussion initially with your representing the seller, with the buyer's agent, or vice versa, so y'all can kind of get a better idea of where where that may go or end up. So but good questions. Let's see. All right, present. We touched on some of this other stuff. Call the agent. Big deal. You wouldn't be surprised how many realtors do not ever pick up the phone and they just text. It's annoying. Pay attention to nonverbal cues like pauses and voice qualities. Now this gets into when you're talking to the other realtor, it's always good. You don't want to be annoying and ask a million questions, but try to ask fewer questions, but more open-ended questions. Say, hey, just showed this. My client, might have some interest. Noticed it's been on the market for 3 weeks. Just wanted to get your thoughts on why. Let them have the floor. That's gonna. They may say, well, it's overpriced or something like that. Well, it wasn't the price I suggested. How's the feedback then? From the other showings, instead of how many showings have you had? You just that's where it comes in handy, and then you'll be able to tell. I mean, some just kill them with kindness too, because you don't want to be too serious, because that sometimes when you're talking to the other realtor, it may help them open up or something too. And a lot of times it's good to start off with a text, say, hey, look, just showed Park Avenue. Client has some interest. Call me when you have had some questions. So they're calling you when they have time set aside, instead of you just randomly calling them. Maybe they're in the middle of something and they can't, focus on it or whatever. So, try to tee it up so where it's, a good scenario for the other realtor, where you're able to get their undivided attention to be able to ask a bunch of questions and, get honest answers or longer, more thought out answers than if it got multiple things going on or something like that. Keep quiet once you present an offer. I mean, you'll get buyers that are you make an offer, obviously you've got a time frame in there, you give them 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever, something like that. I always try to ask the listing agent, hey, look, sending this over, let me know when you think you might be able to catch up with your client. And they'll say, all right, well, yeah, well, they're at work, I'll talk to them, I'll get back after that. Let your buyer know that. So your buyer's not, have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? Because you get that from people all the time. you don't want to relay that. Have you heard anything? Have you talked to him? Have you talked to him? To the listing agent, because the listing agent is like, wow, they must really like it. And then why are they annoying me so much, about this? So it's best just to kind of keep quiet. But it's better to get that information up front so your client's not constantly bugging you about what's going on. So you set expectations like, all right, presented the offer. They're not gonna be able to catch up with the client till after work this evening. We did give them until noon tomorrow, so they may not respond to us until noon tomorrow, but that just make sure they're clear on all that. So you don't get, you don't want your client not having any information, but you at the same time, you don't have to constantly update them every hour on the hour, telling them what's going on when you don't have any news to share with them either. So listen carefully to what's important to the other party. I mean, obviously you'll do that. I try to do that in advance of making the offer, and that's probably more of a preparation part, because you want to, when you're talking to a listing agent, about what to do, how to make the offer perfect. That's you're going to tailor that offer to work best for the seller, but also, for your buyer's needs as well. Stay calm and relaxed. Again, buyers and sellers get emotional. It happens all the time. Do not get sucked into their drama and emotion and everything. You're helping advise them. And at the end of the day, they're making a business decision. I know it's their personal home, or somebody really likes this and already planning where the furniture is going to go and raising kids in house or something like that. But they need to focus on the task at hand. That's the negotiations. And that's where you come in as a calming presence to help keep the drama at a minimum, to help keep them, level-headed throughout the whole process. I always say this, part of our job is part-time, psychologists. We're always trying to keep the peace, keep everybody level-headed, our clients involved. So if your client's getting fired up, you don't want to get fired up, and then relay that to the other side, and they get fired up, that makes the negotiations really difficult. So just, try to keep your clients calm and relaxed, and you will stay that way. Focus on the customer's needs, that's obvious. And give your offer the best chance, and that just comes into doing your homework. Talking to the seller, figuring out, some sellers may say, hey, look, I know it's been on the market for 30 days. We know it's priced a little high, but my client is just not very motivated to sell right now. If you hear that, okay, fine. Relay that to your buyer so they know, that's going to help them, all right, well, it's a long shot, but we really like the house. Let's see what happens. I've had clients do that before where we know going into it that the house is priced a little too high. We know going into the seller is being a stick in the mud about the price, and the clients want to try to get a better deal. Eventually, sometimes they'll just say, screw it, we like this house, we're willing to pay a little bit more for it. Just be patient with your clients. Sometimes that turns around, sometimes the other side will say that. I've heard sellers say, oh, we're not going to come down below this. Eventually they'll come down, to make the deal work. Those lines in the sand and all that are crossed all the time in real estate negotiations. So don't let that be a detriment to you and your ability to tell your client to keep pursuing something. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time for seller to think about it, your buyer to sleep on it, all that. I do that all the time instead of making a rush decision. And you never want to rush them into anything, but if you're up against a deadline or something like that, you have to respond to a counteroffer by 6 o'clock tonight. But your clients, it's a husband and wife, they've had a crazy day at work, they haven't had a chance to talk or anything like that. Just say, hey, look, to this listing agent, can we bump this to 10 o'clock tomorrow morning? They need a little bit of time to sleep on it. Usually they'll be okay doing that. So try to, don't rush people into it, because I find sometimes when people get rushed, they make rash decisions, and sometimes they regret them, and then sometimes they end up wanting to get a release, and then people end up losing earnest money deposits, and they get pissed off at you, and then you don't have a client anymore. So there's
I have a question.
Yep.
As it relates to give your offer the best chance, because if they were in a situation, like you suggested, where the seller's like, you know their price too high, they're like sticking the mud about it. When you say give your offer the best chance, and my buyers are like, I still want to offer on it because I know this is the house I want. What do you suggest? Like, are we sending CMAs attached with our offer? Like, how do we position our offers to truly give it the best chance when we know the seller, we know your price is too high, but you're being a stick in the mud about it? Like, how can we do that?
Feel out the realtor, the listing agent too, because I'll sometimes if it's like, no offense to y'all, but if it's a newer agent and it's a listing agent, then sometimes the seller can be kind of a bull or something and they've really taken control of the situation. The agent has not had much input in that. In that scenario, sometimes I find it useful to like put together comps with the offer. Say, hey, look, they love the house, but they just can't make it work. We don't want to have to get into an appraisal issue, but here's why we think it's worth X and the offer that we've made. That can be useful to do that. If it's a seasoned realtor and they've done their part or they've educated their seller, you can say, hey, look, you can ask, would it be helpful if I send comps over with the offer? Sometimes some realtors, listing agents say, sure, do that because they're, they want to sell at the end of the day. And sometimes you'll be able to, there'll be almost a level of frustration with the listing agent where you can tell, hey, look, I've educated my client on where the market is. It would be, I welcome you to send comps over a second, present it with the offer, where they're probably have an uphill battle with their client because their client's hard-headed or something like that. But yeah, I mean, that's always something that can be helpful to do that. I wouldn't just send them over without asking them because sometimes, I've had that. Not me personally, but I've heard of realtors like getting offended, like, oh, I can't believe they send me comps. What do you think I haven't done my work? Then you're kind of starting off on a bad foot, not only with the seller by making a little offer, but with a listing agent too. So that's something that's a good idea, but I would ask first before you do that to see if the listing agent would find it beneficial.
Okay.
That's a good question though. Any other questions? Good. Let's see. All right, position. Acknowledge and affirm common ground. So that's, all this is just part of not figuring out what everybody's bottom line is, but, trying to in advance figure out if you think this is something that if everybody's gonna be able to meet in the middle or get to a number that everybody's comfortable with. And there's not like one specific way of figuring that out. I mean, you can, you've done your research, you know what the house is worth. You've explained that to your client as far as what it's worth, whether you're representing a buyer or a seller. If you're representing a seller and the house has been on the market for 30 days, they've probably gotten some feedback on the house if it's overpriced. So you're able to, and you always want to get that. If you're going into, you got a listing and it's priced higher than what you recommended, you always want to encourage, buyers agents after they show it, hey, please give us feedback, be honest about pricing. Because a lot of times, buyers agents will just, if they get like the showing time form, they'll just fill out not interested and not fill out anything else because they're just lazy, or sometimes they just don't want to, they think it'll offend the listing agent. All the time, you always, as a listing agent, if the house is sitting on the market, you want honest feedback on there. And a lot of times if I have somebody that gives just like the minimal feedback on like the showing time feedback form, I'll even like call them up, hey, what do you think? How are we gonna price? Especially if it's an agent that I know or something like that, or I know does a lot of business in the neighborhood. And then we'll call back with my client, say, hey, look, I talked to people who just showed it. This is somebody I trust, knows the neighborhood. They thought we're about 20,000 too high. The more and more you do that to a seller that's hard-headed, eventually it'll wear them down, to get them where they need to be. And it also helps if you're getting feedback initially for the first 2 weeks hey, we're overpriced, hey, we're overpriced, hey, we're overpriced, then we get an offer that's low, it's certainly going to help you get them down to where you think they need to be with the price as well. So, that's just part of, getting to common ground is making sure that both sides are aware of where they need to be, and then you only figure that out by asking questions of your client and the listing agent or the buyer's agent or either side. Communication is the best way to get to acknowledge and affirm the common ground. And asking the what and the how questions, open-ended questions like we talked about. Positioning is a process. So as far as and know when to walk away, I mean, that's kind of a tough one to like. Every scenario is different, so it's not like there's a blueprint for like when you should walk away, because it's gonna come down to how serious is your buyer, like or your seller, how motivated is the buyer, the seller on the other side, how far apart are you, what is the market like, how long has it been on the market. There are lots of factors that go into that, but if you get to a point where there's just a gap that's too big to bridge, whether it's, I don't know, I always find that if like you get to 10 grand or less, it's a lot easier to get that worked out. If it's more than 10 grand, that might be kind of the walk away point, or at least, put it on ice for a little bit or something like that. I mean, a lot of times when you do that, people move on and they don't come back. But I'm finding though in this market, because there's such a lack of inventory, I've seen more and more where buyer comes in, makes an offer on a listing, doesn't get worked out, waits around another few weeks, nothing else on the market at all. They'll circle back more so than in like I don't know, spring market where they've got tons of, 4 or 5 new listings come up each week that could work for them. They've got lots of opportunities to do that. Nowadays, you're going to see more people circling back than they used to. So, but if they circle back, a lot of times the offer is not going to be as good. Maybe it's the same as it was before, certainly not going to be better than it was before. So they're circling back because they think they gave it another couple of weeks. Maybe the seller softened up more, something like that. So you need to make your seller aware of that as well. So, but that's a tough call, and that's just based on different scenarios, and it's just something you kind of learn over time and experience about how to handle that. So, let's see. Any questions on any of these 3 Ps? Good. All right, so negotiation tips. I've kind of gone over a lot of these, but just be professional. The best tip I think I can give you for being professional when it comes to negotiating and presenting offers is be organized. And what I told you all about, whether if you're representing a buyer, put the organized email with bullet points together in the body of the email instead of just sending the contract and letting the buyer, the listing agent, review it. Same thing when you're a listing agent, putting the contract summary together, bullet points, forwarding it to your client, telling them to read through it and call you once, let's say, read through it. And then you can kind of share your thoughts and details, because you don't want to try to get into that in an email. I think that's one of the best things that makes you look professional and just makes everything easier for everybody involved. It simplifies things. It cuts back on the amount of reading that the listing agent or your client's going to need to do. It just makes things a lot simpler. And then,
can I ask a question?
Yep.
So let's say you're a listing agent, what would give it away to you that the buyer's agent is new? Or like, how do you be professional and negotiate without sounding new? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Number one, I'm going to see your number. And if you have a high number that like your, MLS numbers, I think they're like, if you're like in the 80,000 range, that shows you're new, but that doesn't necessarily, I mean, there are new agents that I've seen who are like, wow, they've sold like 30 houses in their first year. And it's like, that's good. They're on it. I think, never say, hey, this is so-and-so, I'm a new agent. Like, don't start off a phone call like that with an agent you're calling. I think it helps too, just to like I said, if you are calling up, kind of know in advance, like, all right, I just showed your listing. My client's got some interest. Just know in advance what questions you're going to ask. Don't, say, hey, look, showed it, got some interest, so it's been on the market for a few weeks. Any feedback as to why it hadn't sold? Leave it at that. And then don't, well, I don't know if I can think of another question, just have a plan, of attack before you go into the call. So you're organized. And then, when you're reading through, like, the listing agent's not going to know how much time you put into reviewing the contract and reviewing the comps and all that kind of stuff. But do that. Make sure you dot your I's, cross your T's, do all that. I mean, I've found many clerical errors in contracts written to me by seasoned agents, just as many from seasoned agents as I do from new agents. So just because you're a new agent doesn't mean it's going to be, that it's going to be a sloppy contract or anything like that. I get that all the time. I get it probably more so from older agents that have been around a while that are maybe like shifted to doing it more part-time or something like that, that aren't always in the business. I think just know the forms that you're doing. That helps you. I would worry more about not coming off as a new agent to your client than I would to, the other side. And that just comes with preparation and just getting a habit of when you're, like I said before, when you're getting ready to show a house, do your homework before. So you know about the market conditions, about the house, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't know, I would say probably on a listing of mine, 1 out of probably every 25 agents will call me to ask questions about it before going out there. So it's unusual. It's not like I get bugged by it. So when I do get a call, when somebody shows, is getting ready to show it, I mean, I don't mind telling them what's up, what's going on. I'm not going to give them any information that's like going to hurt my seller or whatever, but I want to make a sale, I want to help them out, so it's don't feel like you're being annoying, or, I mean, of course there are going to be realtors out there like, oh, what, some grumpy old lady or old man or something that's listed it, but whatever, they are what they are. Don't let that get you down. And just preparation, I think, is key to doing that. But yeah, you don't want to announce yourself as a new agent or say, this is the second time I've written an offer. Hopefully you'll like it, or anything like that. So, but yeah, just being organized, I think, is a big thing with that. So, we kind of touched on paying attention to your communication and tone with anyone involved in the transaction. Stay level-headed. That's the best thing to do. If there's, anxiety or excitement from your client, don't convey that to the other side. You don't want to let them know too many details about your client's frame of mind, especially if you represent a buyer. Certainly don't want to let them know. Only time you do, let me back up a little bit. You have a client, buyer client, is just, this is it. This is the house, our dream house. We just found it. If it's been on the market for a couple of weeks and you're able to kind of make a normal offer and go through a negotiation process and everything, keep that to yourself. If it's a multiple bid scenario and your client, this is their dream house, let them know. Like, make sure you know to let the listing agent know, because that's always very helpful. Especially if it's you know, if it's a non-investor that owns the house, you know, an investor, they don't care. They're looking at numbers. But if it's, you know, a homeowner that's selling it, especially if it's somebody that's been there for a while, maybe it's like a older couple or something that's downsizing or going to a retirement home or something like that, and they raise their kids in the house, always, and your client loves the house, you let the listing agent know, you know, I know you're not supposed to write letters these days, but you can do that in the body of an email. When you're sending that email with the bullet points about the offer and everything, put a little paragraph in there, you know, whether it's from your client or whether it's you just kind of conveying your client's interest in the house. You know, be genuine, don't be cheesy, but seriously, let them know how much they do, because that comes into play a lot. Because if it's a multiple bid scenario and I've got like 3 offers that are all pretty close, and, you know, I don't have like one, if maybe there's an agent that stands out, that helps, somebody I've worked with. But if my client's always like, all right, so who are these buyers? Like, what's their deal? Like, you know, most sellers are nosy and they want to know that who's buying their house. And sometimes that helps them feel it's a tiebreaker situation. Obviously, they're most likely not going to take a lower offer just because your clients they really love the house, but that you can help out with that. The emotion that your client has, you know, you want to be able to express it to that in a multiple bid situation to help you out there, but certainly not if you're in a negotiation situation where you're trying to get a better deal. So there are times and places to you know, to give more or less information than you probably should. Like I said, don't reveal too much, you know, unless it can be advantageous. Definitely listen more than you talk. There's some realtors you'll call up to get information, and I mean, you have to just be like, hey, I just showed, you know, Park Avenue. Oh, wow, let me tell you about it. And you're just like, you got to sit there and suffer through all their, you know, BS about the house. But hopefully you're able to get some information that's useful about that. So you might have to suffer through some long-winded realtor conversations out there, which is just part of your job. So it is what it is. Keep your client's motivations close to your chest. You know, that you never want to disclose too much unless it's going to work to their advantage. That's why when you're like a listing agent and you're a buyer's agent, is it calling to ask you questions? Just state the facts. Don't, you know, don't get trapped into answering questions about, you know, if it's like, if I got a listing right now that we're starting showings tomorrow. It's a divorce situation. Husband's still living there, his wife moved out. I don't want to share that with anybody because they're both still on the, you know, the title and everything listed as the sellers. But sometimes when people know it's a divorce, they're like, ooh, all right, yeah. So they might want to get out of this, you know, so they think they have a little bit of an advantage. That's something I would never disclose because I think it's going to hinder my seller's ability to move the property. So little things like that. There's reasons that you don't want to give too much information to the other side because you're protecting your client's best interest at the end of the day. And don't be attached to the outcome. That's really important. That's going to be the best thing to be able to get referral business. Don't, you know, if a deal doesn't work out, hey, it doesn't work out. But as long as you did everything you can to try to make it work out for your client based on what they wanted you to do, then at the end of the day, you're going to look good in their eyes and they're going to continue to use you. They're going to send you referrals. So, hey, it's part of the game. You might have to write 2-3 offers for some people, sometimes more. I've had that happen before, but they appreciate you the more you stick with them, the more you put just as much effort into the first offer that you make for them as you do for the 5th offer that you make for them. Some people you can show them one house, they make an offer, boom, done. That's easy money. not always like that. Some people you show 30 houses and they make 7 offers and they finally get it worked out. Yep, that's a lot more work. It all evens out in the end, and they'll love you for it, for being dedicated to them, and that's how you're going to get more business and referrals that way. It's by treating people right, treating the way you would want to be treated, and being a wealth of knowledge for them in an industry that a lot of people think they know a lot about real estate, but they really don't. And you should, and you can very easily, and that's what you're there for, to be able to share that with your clients. I think that's it. Any other questions y'all have on negotiations? It's pretty, it's at the end of, I mean, when you boil it down, it's pretty easy, but it takes, experience to get through it. And I know, sounds like all you are pretty fresh, pretty green. Don't let that deter you from asking questions. And I mean, I still ask questions. I've been doing this 25 years and I still will call realtors, especially if it's a realtor that I know, before I'm gonna show a house. Just, hey, what's up? How you doing? Good. Yeah, family's all right. Yeah, whatever. What's the deal with the house? What's going on? Why it's sold? It's so useful to be able to know that before you go in and you show a house. Or when you have a listing and a realtor's shown it, instead of just dealing with the showing time feedback, call them, say, hey, all right, open up. What's the deal? What do we need to do? And then, some people, if it's somebody or somebody that's in the office or something like that, a lot of times you'll be able to get better, more useful feedback that you can tell your sellers, because, if the house isn't selling, the seller's going to want to know why. And all the way, you're the one that's supposed to be there to provide that for them. And if it's overpriced or something like that, or there's something that they need to change, if the carpet looks like crap and you told them to replace it before they listed it, but they didn't listen to you, and everyone's coming in and says the carpet looks like crap, you need to keep telling them that. That'll wear them down. It should have been done in advance, but sometimes sellers have different things going on where they don't have the cash or availability to do those kinds of things. So, but they need to know why the house isn't selling. So it's really important to always have lines of communication open with your clients, to share those things with them. What else? So how many offers have y'all written? A lot? You've been doing it 3 years. You probably have a fair amount then.
A handful, because I was showing assistant for a little bit.
Okay.
For about a year. So that was last year when it was still kind of crazy, especially the beginning of last year. So yeah, I got familiar with it pretty well. It's kind of all the same at the end of the day once we start doing it.
Right.
But it was really important to call those other agents and talk to them and get an understanding of where they were at. Because that's more, or it's just as important to have a good relationship with local realtors than it is to have a good relationship with their clients. Because, you could help somebody buy a house maybe once, you could work with the same agent 10 times in that year. So, the more you communicate with them and get to know them, the better off you are. Just like Bill said, multiple offer situations to have that leg up. Yeah.
And Richmond's small. Seriously, so you always want to treat, other realtors right, be professional, be nice, because there's it's weird. There's some realtors I can say I've worked with that person like 10 times or last 3 years. And there's another realtor who I know sells a ton of real estate, and I haven't worked with them but once every 25 years. But still, that you remember that one time, if it was a bad time, especially, or if they didn't do something right or whatever, it can stick with you. So you want to just, make sure you kind of have everything together when you do that, because it is a lot about relationships with other realtors.
And they'll tell you too. They'll be like, we had that happen a couple of times. They were like, you were really close with somebody else and you weren't the highest offer, but we've done a deal with you all before, and so that helped. So you do run into that too, and they'll let you know that as well, so. Yeah, just try not to be rude, if they do get rude, just don't match where they're at.
Exactly. Yeah, because not everybody is, I mean, most people in this company are friendly and know the deal and everything, but there's a lot of other people that are just, that aren't that friendly. And sometimes it's poor communication. Like I've had shown a house, text the realtor, hey, look, showing this tomorrow, call me every few, I had a couple questions, nothing. Try one more time right before we get ready to show it, nothing. Show it, clients like it, call them after that, nothing. So sometimes you can do everything you can, but not everybody's going to be as cooperative too. And as long as you're doing your part, trying to get as much information, then that's the best you can do as well. So
I've had that happen before. Like I wrote an offer, I called before we showed it, called after we showed it, wrote an offer, never heard anything back.
Yeah.
Never.
You submitted it, you never heard back.
Never
I
heard.
did that, and the girl, she was, oh, it was my 30th birthday last night, so I was out, like, I was like, did you get the offer? I'm like, happy birthday, man. Like, I said it last night, and I texted you, and I called, and I emailed you.
yeah, if that's okay, there's nothing we can do, and that's out of our control. But not everybody is sometimes can be as professional as you would like them to be with that. So you need to, in that case, as long as you're telling your client, like, look, I've called, I've texted, I've emailed, that way they know you're doing your job, and they're not going to get mad at you or look down upon you for what you've done, because you've done as much as you can. But yeah, I mean, I've had
There was like
before.
an hour left on expiration, I was like, I finally got through to her, I was like, good lord.
At least he never responded, even to this day, like not even working with that client anymore, still have not heard.
Really?
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Did the house ever end up selling, or
It's
was
still on the market.
it? Well, so like in that case, what I would do is, seriously, if you made an offer and seriously, multiple communications, no response, figure out who the broker is.
Yeah, that's what I ended up doing. I ended up calling the broker and I didn't get a response from the broker either. I don't know what they ended up doing with it. It was a foreclosure though, so I'm thinking they were just in there like, small potatoes, like they weren't.
Yeah, some of those companies they're not like a local company that has it. Sometimes they can be kind of hard to deal with, because there's not like the agent a lot of times just puts in an MLS and it doesn't have anything to do with it. And there's like a servicing company that comes in to service the foreclosures that they can be kind of a nightmare to deal with.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
So in that case, like if she submitted the offer and then the house sold, but you never heard back, like are they obliged to let you know what? Like I put in an offer, your house sold, but you didn't, like they're obligated to tell you?
I mean, not really, but if they, if your offer was, I mean, I've had that happen before where made an offer, never heard back from the realtor, say, hey, look, did you get this? Made a good offer and then ended up seeing it go under contract with the listing agent as a buyer's agent also. And I was like, he's like, well, we got this deal worked out before, we just hadn't pended it. I was like, okay. This was like almost 20 years ago. My clients somehow ran into the sellers like months later after it had closed and everything, because we saw that it closed. My clients had made a higher offer and they said, we never got the offer. And the guy was just being shyster because he wanted to get the full shot, and he made up some excuse that it was like a Jewish holiday or something, so he couldn't work that day. And so we tried to there was nothing we could do at that point because it was a little bit of hearsay, but we tried to follow up and get him taken to the board and all that. And at that point it was done. But so it's rare when that kind of stuff happens. I feel like when I was early on in real estate, more of those things kind of happen just because I don't know if the enforcement wasn't as strict or it was more of, people, there was a little more, I don't know if agents weren't as accountable then or something like that. But anyways, I don't feel like we see that as much anymore. That I think at the time, if somebody got a fine for depot or something like that, it didn't make as big a deal. Now when people do, it's like posted and everything. You see their names on there, so I think that's scaring a lot of people from keeping things straight more so these days, which is good for everybody involved. So. Any other questions or thoughts, negotiations? All right. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate y'all. Hope y'all learned something today, and good luck moving forward with offers. Remember, call before you show. Always helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I think, well, let me look at the link. It's probably the air or something. And I need to look at it because like we have one baby in my boiler. Then we just got another one in my son's school. And I'm like, okay, now we have something. It's just that, yeah. It is really that, especially at the right time. So, how you doing? Yeah. Well, I mean, no, okay. Because I'm to the front. My job. What do you think? Oh, okay. Okay, this is a local, I can remember what you. Oh, okay. You will. Oh, yeah, okay. Cause I don't even know who that is. Next Monday is supposed to be the research contract that goes. Oh, God, I need that. Yeah, I'm hoping that one will be. Oh, really? Wait, for 8-9? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna need the contract because. The contract is really not that hard to understand. I did a contract class with Shane Law. I'm gonna find the packet he made for me, and I'll share it with you guys. It's really beneficial. I'm gonna take that way.
I've had a client, who's actually my father-in-law, that I sit down and go through every single line of that contract.
Yeah.
So I actually went beforehand, I knew he was gonna make me do that, and I went through each line of each notes, so that I already highlighted sections, so that I could go over it with him, but, well, at least I got to know the contract.
So I guess if you want to show up, I'm like, well, how does that work when you're pretty? But I feel like everyone to know what infection is coming up.
Right.
I did when I had I was just I did. So this seems to be the same thing. What happened, what situation for negotiation point, when the market the contract and everything, because I was like, this was on my second mistake. I was like, you need to know this.
Right.
So like when it comes, because I
on your client, like if they like sold and bought like a bunch of houses, then they're usually aware.
Yeah, I guess I feel saying just judge it.
Mhm.
But I also feel like
Yeah.
yeah. Don't worry.
I know I had it written out, but I think it's more.
But then
The
also like
that
that.
and I just look back at that line, but there's a
Yeah.
I think.
I don't have people like that, but I just.
You know, bullet point it, even if you, and I always leave a copy of the contract with them. Like, if we do a buyer consultation, I print a copy of the purchase agreement, and I leave it. I'm like, oh, better time for it.
Right, yeah. You're still gonna need this, so you need to make sure that you're signing.
And when I you said it's in a whole and pointy.
Trying to get a flow, it's hard with two players, that's good.
Is that you in that next?
Yeah.
With the one, who said the wine thing?
Me,
Oh,
yeah.
that's your number.
So you're the 434 number.
Yeah.
Okay, you need to take that. I was like, I don't know who all in here, but I
Listing presentation, what are you using for that?
I just pulled what was on, Command Design and I did the most of it.
I didn't have, I deleted a lot.
They have
Yeah.
something on there.
It's funny, I'm doing the same thing right now. I'm getting ready to print this, I'm going to try and print it.
Yeah.
I haven't printed
Where
it.
did you find it?
Same as them, I just.
Did
went on
Rachel start
command.
your printing yet?
Yeah, she
Okay.
said, I just went on command and.
Yeah.
Show you here, I just deleted a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The same way.
That's one that I'm not with it, so I just want
Yeah.
to see some other options.
Well, this was good.
There's like a couple
Like,
lines
a
there.
really good one. Kristen Wood, she did the class last week and she had her.
Yeah, hers was really
I
good.
was there, actually.
Oh, I think she's very
professional.
Hers was
I
very
really
good.
like her, like, glossy over.
I mean, this is, I don't have that yet, but I mean, I just like took some of the stuff and added my information to it. Yeah, a lot of stuff just comes with it.
And it's
It's
very
dark.
color-ish.
Right, it's got the process, which I like. I like this because it's got the process.
Yeah, that's all. And they have to.
Yeah, very basic.
And, they like this stuff, they.
Yes.
Videos,
You know, so that's good for the client.
From it.
So I went to command
Yeah.
this out.
Yeah,
It makes me feel better.
It's,
it does. I'm happy he started, but it was definitely nerve-wracking.
And so I have to delete it.
So Friday too, so I see by Friday, so let me talk.
Yes.
Probably take
And then
you.
these ones, I kind of played around with a bunch of different things.
Sound good?
But if you go to designs and go to templates. If you go to design,
You might be
you
working
go to like
from
templates. It'll show a bunch of templates.
How you doing?
Sometimes, you know, sometimes maybe.
Personal email.
Like a little bit crazier, but that's okay. I said like a little bit crazier with all that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I did have to play around with it like that.
Okay. About something being like, I'm sorry, she's never done anything. Before, so, but I keep just.
Yeah.
Good thing, you know, it's sort of like
I
doing.
hit click on full
Mhm.
design
Yeah.
and then choose template. And you can just choose like from a bunch
So
of
like they said,
different.
I'm sorry, you know, the last 90 days. Because I feel like it gets around this time and everyone gets really like busy. Thanksgiving, the showing, you know, the buying and other things going down the showing. And the building pipeline.
Right, and be ready for when like. you're
And
ready.
then you just.
I think that.
You get to choose template and they've got like coming soon.
I will.
You have to put your, yeah, so buyer presentation is here.
It gives me,
Yeah.
it's like, that is it.
Right.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Listing pressure, we do like the one we have previously already. And you don't mind it. So like you have to change a bunch of different things in there, like. So I have it. I'm just gonna keep it.
Soon as I brought on board the market.
Practice some of it. Maybe I'll just practice my, walk it through it or something. And I'll do the same with the buyer's presentation, because they have the same footage too. They're like 32 pages. I got mine. Because I just, because a lot of it's repetitive, like some of the pages go over the same exact stuff. And some of it just didn't apply. It's like showing all your past history, like your sales and your averages. I'm deleting that, so. Yeah, so I just deleted a bunch of that kind of stuff.
Right.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah. Well, I know.
It's a lot. I just kind of did a little bit each day.
Like, I'm also back to what I know about driving.
Yeah.
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 Right.
And if I won't be there, I'll just be in, and I'll be mad.
Hold them first.
And the,
Real estate,
slow,
you know, that kind of conversation before I have to do it slowly, because I don't want to miss the context.
trying to remind myself.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Gotta be
it's-
patient, I like.
Gotta be patient, yeah.
Patient with the process. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not getting paid. Coming in at a lower time, that's allowing us to you know.
And that offer, they said, well, I mean, like, it's a concern town, it was the 50,000 agents. I mean, yeah. Which is, and I've had plans of work. That's what, yeah. Which is validating, but also. It's good,
Right?
Yes.
Yeah,
And someone lost
an opportunity for all of us.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Right.
Were you there? Did you go to that conference in Dallas?
No, not that one, I went to one in Johnson. Oh, the day one.
Are you gonna go to Cambridge?
If I may say.
So this listening, you're trying to do it.
If I say, just like. I would love to be there.
Okay.
So it's not gonna be all alone.
With, I know there.
Like, I'm not paying it much money.
It's just so much.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Yeah, but just because.
But I'm like, well, they've already taken it to the.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then they trying to get that, people actually go talk
So
to
that,
them.
but I can also.
Trying to get that right.
Organize the,
And then,
you know, the information that I have coming in.
Yeah.
Or
So I-
an email,
Yeah.
work on my checkbook.
Yeah, exactly. So we're looking for that.
Oh, my God.
And then Monday.
I know.
Then the,
Yeah.
oh.
Transaction coordinator. Now, switch my hat. I was just when I was at another work for a year. Yeah, so I kind of went through that. I tell you some all that one here and here.
Everything they did, and I just. I was supposed to be in the morning, I was up in the morning, and I'm like,
Is that here?
No, but clothing, but it wasn't clothing. You get a straight one, like. I'm gonna close.
They get it printed.
Congratulations, having a.
No, I just wanted to get it, practice it.
Yeah.
Go through it and bring all walk my family through it, because I just like having company. I
Yeah.
don't know if I like it funny.
Yeah, wording for.
In a word.
I don't know if I like it up front and back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, also, you see that, I didn't get it from the other people. They, there's another part, paper, like a field paper. Yeah, and then,
How do you do that?
There's a different tree that you can go. It has a it's like.
That's what I wanted to do.
Well, I just, it was like, I was like, but you don't get them now. I was like, I don't budget, I can even start to do things. I am. I had to figure out this, contract situation, I was there. I said that when we were saying, I almost felt just to the track, like, we can get shit for you next. Cause they easy to store, that's what Maria said. But we had all black things. I think it's more tables in here now. I think so. Okay. All right. I sent this to the other lady this morning. Actually, I don't think I have your number. You know, I have a message to see. I'm really bad. Oh, what? Yeah. Cause I know you have over that. I don't think I ever, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay, I got it. Just text me one. I am, as soon as I finish writing, and you can just try one thing if you want. Joy, and I got it. That's the ship from that. They had a kind of thing. Okay, I didn't see that. Okay, that's just right. Is that one? Are you on the running? So that's why I'm saying like just for one phone, it's like 4 acre lot. This is in Glenallen. Oh, Glenallen? Yeah, it's on October 19th to 24. Okay. They're gonna do a content day. Just sounds good. Or you can do one to the other. Have you ever had a professional board coaching?
So for what?
Yeah. And then when you sign it, it doesn't look so, it doesn't need.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah. And good luck with your list day. I'm not gonna give you a list day. You got a list day? Look, it's a listing. Okay, you're learning something. Girl, that would be hard. And it ain't, I mean, it's not even like a lot of money, it's a lot of it. What's going on? So this is the one, I think I was going to tell you before, so we initially drew up the list and we went back in like September. We ended up in that stock to it because they didn't have a plan to actually get the tenants that was in the home.
Yeah, definitely like that paper.
Did it what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You definitely feel a difference.
And then on that counter, there's that big machine, that's how you use spiral. I'm not interested,
you know,
but
the
Rachel
should
show
you know, but I understand, and I'm not,
Yeah.
I drew out another determination for them, so I just go for them in blanket, just to make it easy on them, they do not do anything. So, put a stock to that, no errors, fast forward. I'm like, look, we are gonna try to close our line. I was looking at 14 days closing, it's easy, it's very long, it was about 100 days of decisions, like, let's say you do my thing, y'all have a hard time, like you said, I don't know how to do it, so I feel like I should have in the house, I don't know how to do it in the house. Alright, but I can consider the whole time, so if you can make it really last, I think it's not. But, you know, like, it's easy, and y'all come out with more than what I had, so, whatever. So, I asked the tenant to leave the house on Monday from 11:45 to 1:15, which I think we were going to get a tenant notice and get just doing my job first or whatever. They get there at 12 for people to do the walkthrough. They get there at 12 to tenant is there. And so all the shit that we talking about. Sabotage. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, they gotta do something about that. So they dropped the price to $10,000 more from what they were offering initially, which they were only offering initially like 140, which was again a lot lower, but it's like, okay, we do not have any work. Yeah, now we're gonna do no work, so fix the 140. Right. And that's cheaper than another thing to show them that they're doing that, you know, cool. So then they came in at 129, 250. They showing all this stuff that they say wrong. And I guess just put an eye on it to the same condition at home. All right, cool. So I let them know. I'm like, look, the tenant sabotage the walkthrough. What are you gonna get them out or not? Like, right? So at this point, now the wholesale people, based on the walkthrough, they're requesting to do the septic and well section and the contract is contingent on that. Okay, so this should, I'm sorry, this fails, we then have to disclose what was found if we mark it or fix it. If we disclose it, you're gonna be basically selling land. You might as well.
Mine was gonna go for
Yeah, me too.
What do you got? Two, both sides and behind it,
Yeah,
or just one side on each side?
both sides.
I'm gonna use this, I'm gonna use this paper.
If you do both, oh, I was gonna say, if you do both sides, you're gonna need a thicker paper, because you can see straight through
Right,
it.
yeah, I'm gonna use that paper, but that's, I wanna do.
Yeah, I
If
think
you do one side, or
How many pages?
it's 13 total.
I would do your cover page, one side, your inside page is two sides. Your back page, one side, that's what I would do,
There you go.
and I would definitely bind
Okay,
it. Or folder. Or like a,
like,
Cause you can buy the California folder.
That's what I was
that's
thinking.
the
Maybe put that in
three
a
prong
folder.
folders, yep.
Like, put it in a
and I
folder.
think, like, I got some of the home warranty information is back in the folder, and, I also do like my, net sheet. Like, if you're doing a buyer consultation, I'll do like a net sheet based on what their pre-approval amount is, just when you give them a little more added value. I use Vestas website, Vestas Settlement, which, is our people outside of company here. They have a really easy way to use, their platform. And you can be just go in, you just create an account, it's easy, use the email, put the code in, it's very easy. And you just go in and fire that sheet. And you just put in a price, estimate some stuff. And you can provide that, just let them know, like, hey, this is just an estimate, but this is, license fee, it'll, include like a 1% down that they'll have to put in the escrow. The earnest money deposit and it'll also calculate like the taxes and fees and title, fee and, just like miscellaneous costs. So I'll put that in there too. But I know you can do it in the MLS. I think Zillow has like some type of form of it, but I know you.
But market now.
Okay,
I
yeah.
like it, like, I like doing that.
Me too, me too.
They're fun.
Yeah, me too. I like that. And that must be the Capital One co-star thing. I don't know, the data computer stuff, but, I really do enjoy doing it. So if you know like an area where they're looking, maybe you can put together like a CMA of like a specific neighborhood, just to kind of, but I definitely put the next year, always do that.
That's,
Yeah. And then of course you can adjust that, like if y'all do go out to look at something, you kind of adjust it based on what you're looking at or whatever. But I found it adds like a little body, or at least you get some thinking about like, all right, how much do I need, Cause people
so,
have to.
we're gonna know for that.
Okay, so I can just put in 300.
300, actually.
Exactly, yeah. So that'll just be a little more like, yeah. And then I use mixed cards, which I'm wanting to, because I guess he doesn't promote that he is that he does more than he, because it might be like a conflict of interest. Every time we talk to more about, insurance, and the insurance broker, but I can want to check him out. He does what? He's a lender. I mean, he does more, he does both, but he doesn't promote, it because I guess because it would be like a conflict. Yeah. But I want to see when because I really like him. Yeah. Yeah.
He's gonna be some things like if you want to buy them and stuff like that.
When he was talking about that, I was just like, I really like Nick. I feel like he'll be a really good person for a lot of our clients to, build a relationship with. So I wanna, come up with these things.
Yeah, I don't want to get stuck.
Actually, I'm not gonna have to.
Yep, me too.
We don't have no, we don't know. Because they're like a good fire drills. I'm just like, that's not bad, all y'all stuff. Yeah, we shut it. Don't sleep.
It's such a great day to be in the office working together, getting some business
See, I
done.
get more done at home though, cause I got the two screens set up. And I got the laptop in the middle, I can just move stuff back and forth.
There's nothing done at home but the power there.
Oh, no.
It's better. I want to get to work now, but I bought my screen from home
So
and
did
put it
you?
in our office. Someone gave us screens when we went
Oh, I know,
work.
that's what I'm using right now. I'm using the same one.
Me
and that's-
too, I want my
I'm going to beat my old boss, get my laptop and everything back today.
Oh, yeah.
Phone and all that stuff, and I'm like.
Cause I asked my son, all of these monitors back, and he was like, keep it. I said,
Yep. I
They
got
said
it.
the same, they want nothing to their laptop back. They say, I keep right, that's a chair, I'm all that.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
I got that working nothing in.
Yep. What about
I'm gonna make sure the rest not. Don't mind the eyes that.
No?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, all right,
I'm really.
fair enough.
So.